Not these damn pipes again. Wait a minute. There are many horror games that you can play today, from your zombie shoot fests in Resident Evil to your Five Nights at Freddy's.
Was that the bite of 87?
But there is one horror franchise that does things differently. One franchise that tugs at the most deep parts of your psyche and leaves you both feeling haunted, yet curious to learn more. And that, to me, has got to be Silent Hill. And not because it throws in cheap jump scares at you. Rather, Silent Hill forces you instead to take a look at the human element, but through the lens of many different protagonists, with each of the first 4 games in the franchise sporting a similar yet distinct aesthetic that made them all cult classics. However, there was one Silent Hill that no one asked for, but that still exists. That game is Silent Hill Origins, which was the 5th game in the Silent Hill franchise, but it's often kind of panned by people and fans as being a good, but in the end kind of pointless game. So given that I love finding the diamonds in the rough where others really do not want to look, I'll be stepping into the shoes of Travis Grady to discover the dark story, the new gameplay, and of course, the lore of Silent Hill. Silent Hill Origins begins with our protagonist Travis delivering goods to the town of Brahms. Now, during the drive, he has a conversation with one of his trucker friends before hitting his brakes and almost sliding off the road. This was because a person tried to cross. Now, after coming to a full stop, Travis exits the truck. With no one around, the only thing he sees is a girl in his rearview mirror. Now, at this point, I would nope the hell out, but Travis decides that he has balls of steel, and he wants to follow the creepy ghost girl that he sees in front of him.
Huh? Hey, come back!
And this is where the game truly starts. Heading down the road, there are tons of billboards with a bunch of references to previous Silent Hill games before we eventually reach the official welcome sign to Silent Hill. And I'm gonna be real, I totally don't expect shit to go downhill from here. Now, a quick note I would like to make is actually about the music playing in the background. See, the opening song is called ORT, and it features vocals by Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. Now, the name of the song, being ORT, actually stands for oral rehydration therapy, which is a treatment often used to deal with different illnesses caused by dehydration, which is actually very fitting given what Travis is about to run into. Reaching the end of the road, we see a large building on fire with a creepy-looking woman peeking at us from around the corner. Now, without hesitation, we run into the burning building. And this is because Travis hears the cries of someone inside. Entering, this place is a literal hell. With most of the doors being inaccessible, we instead decide to go upstairs, with Travis, this idiot, almost falling to his death 5 minutes into the game. Now, looking around on the floor, the first thing I spot is one of the paintings. When interacting with it, Travis points out that this painting makes him want to stop and have a look. But he doesn't have any time for it. Now, what we actually see on the drawing is none else than Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2, which I found to be a cool little Easter egg, and honestly, small details like these are what makes me love games like Silent Hill. Going into the only open room, the flames are engulfing the whole place, and each second, this is starting to feel more like Death Valley. Now, on the floor, we see a strange symbol that Travis points out is making his head hurt, simply by looking at it. On the floor, there is another thing. It's the charred body of a little girl, and she looks like she might be a bit dehydrated. I'm a horrible person. Now, as we try to pick her up, she whispers faintly that we should let her go.
You're coming with me.
Yoink.
But Travis picks her up anyways. As the floor cracks, we can't go back the same way we came inside. Instead, the same symbol from earlier now appears in front of us, and it removes the flames blocking our path. After some finessing around this whole place, Travis finally makes it out. But the fatigue and exhaustion from the fumes of the house starts to hit him, and he passes out as we hear sirens blaring in the distance. Waking up, Travis isn't totally sure where he's found himself. Now, reading one of the signs, we figure out that we're in Silent Hill.
Silent Hill? What happened last night?
And this is also where the game gives us the map, which in these games is an extremely useful item. Now, it seems that Travis is wanting to find out where the girl is, so we're going to be looking for her. The place marked on our map is the Alchemilla Hospital. This is a location which is actually present throughout a few different Silent Hill games. Walking around with every other direction being blocked off, with the game pretty much telling me, "Hey boss, you're not leaving," I'm pretty much resorting to go into an alley. However, we do find a health drink here before we decide to go to the hospital. Looking around the front desk, we find a notice letter telling us that the second and third floors are under renovation. And here we find another map. This one is for the hospital itself, which will be super helpful. To be honest, for the most part, the front desk is empty, with only really the static of the TV eerily going off in the corner.
Hey guys, I'm in
Silent Hill.
just hanging out.
Have you seen a little girl around here? Short, black hair, 7 years old?
Continuing through the building, we find our first save point, which is represented by a red triangle, kind of reminiscent of those weird pentagrams we saw earlier where we're saving the girl. Heading down the hallway, just after saving our game, we run into a man wearing a black suit.
You a doctor?
Can I help you?
That fire last night. The girl who was burned. Is she here?
A girl?
Now, this is the Doctor, also known as Michael Kaufman. Now, this guy is a very important character in the Silent Hill lore, but also someone that we should not be so trusting of, as he isn't exactly the most reliable person in Silent Hill.
I'm sorry. Perhaps someone in reception could help you. I have urgent business to attend to.
After asking us a bunch of regular questions, he decides to leave in the elevator, mentioning he has important business to attend to. However, we do notice that he takes the elevator to the second floor. Now, entering after him, if things haven't already been clear, I think the dirty gurney right in front of us should make it more than abundant. Something isn't totally right in this place, because when we interact with it, the text tells us that it's dirty and someone just left it there, something that you normally wouldn't expect in a hospital. Heading up to the second floor, we eventually exit, when all of a sudden the screen goes static, and the audio becomes much more jarred. In the distance, Travis spots a fine ass, or at least he thought it was. Instead, we're faced off with this game's first enemy type, the Nurse. Now, these guys exist in almost all Silent Hill games, with this particular design being more reminiscent of the bobblehead nurse from Silent Hill 2. Against the Nurse, the screen gets extremely static, which is due to our radio, which in every other Silent Hill game is something you eventually pick up. However, Travis is a truck driver, so he has one on him from the moment we started the game. Now, by emitting the static and the noise, it tells us when enemies are close by. So, for my sake, because I am a pussy, I'll be keeping it on throughout this playthrough. Looking around, the only weapon we see is a conveniently placed large hammer. Picking it up, we beat the shit out of the Nurse. So, quickly before we continue, I want to take a moment and explain something important. See, Silent Hill Origins originally came out for the PSP handheld and was later ported over to the PlayStation 2. But given that I don't have either of those two consoles, I had to play the game on an emulator, which wasn't the most ideal solution. My first run was on the PlayStation 2 version of the game, which has by far the superior looking 3D models and graphics, where the characters just don't look like potatoes. However, the PS2 version has a huge issue. It's way too dark. It's like you're walking around blind half the time. So I decided to do my second and third run of the game on the emulated PSP version, which has its own flaws, but does come with better visibility. So if it ever seems like the game looks a bit different, it's because I jumped between the two versions. So keep that in mind, and it isn't really the perfect way to enjoy this game. Now, after defeating the Nurse, we head inside of room 205. Here, we find a piece of paper mentioning a patient with third-degree burns, which most likely is the girl we saved from the burning building. After having a stroll around the whole room and not really finding anything of interest, we check the mirror, but Travis notices something's wrong. He points out that the reflection isn't right, perhaps because the things on the other side of the mirror look a bit off. Just as we're about to leave the room, Travis stops and we see the girl from earlier. Now, after walking up the mirror and touching the bloody handprint, things have seemingly changed. This is the Otherworld, a location famous within Silent Hill as it serves as a nightmarish alternative to our real world. The first thing we find here is a scalpel, which makes sense in a doctor's office, as well as a pair of plastic lungs in a box with the word breathe on it. By now, you may have also noticed that Travis has an infinite supply of space, and we can also use our fists to fight back, which was something that wasn't actually possible in previous games. This was the first time they did that. Leaving room 205, the whole hospital is turned a ghoulish red, and it's filled to the brim with nurses trying to kill us. Now, it's best to avoid them, and instead we make our way to room 202. Inside, we find another note.
Worry not. To contain her power, no one will come to her aid. One of the hide them, protect them.
It seems that that little girl we interacted with from the road from earlier is somehow related to this note, as these people are talking about someone using powers, and so far, the only person displaying any sort of powers has been her. Here we also find a golden egg, which we'll be needing to open a door on the first floor. Now, to reach it, we use the stairs, but here we get cornered by one of the nurses. We managed to beat her using the game's finisher system, which allows you to fully kill off an enemy by simply holding X. Heading downstairs, we can now insert the egg. Doing this, we're allowed to enter the room, which turns out to be a bathroom. Looking around inside of the toilet, we find a note which highlights the letters INSTLIHE and LU, which comes from the sentence, "Inside Stevie, little Henry lurks," which is a little odd, but it's supposed to be a student's memo to remember the names of different organs. As we make it closer to the toilets, I'm just waiting for the Skibbity Boop guy to make an appearance, but instead we learn that it's just a filthy toilet. However, the second toilet seems to have its lid loose, so like any law-abiding citizen, I'm gonna make it my business to mess around with other people's shit. Now, we loosen the lid, and inside we find the plastic liver, appropriately found in the toilets given the liquids it has to deal with. Now we have 2 body parts, possibly 5 being needed based on the note we found. Checking the mirror in the bathroom, once we interact with it, we're transported back to the normal world. See, unlike other Silent Hill games, we actually have the ability to go and leave the other world as we choose. This is something that people have a lot of gripes with, but I personally find it to be a bonus as it allows me a bit more freedom to explore both sides of Silent Hill. Looking around the toilets, we find one cubicle with the words Amy 31 written on them. Given that nothing in Silent Hill is left for random, we note this information down, as it might be useful for later. In the last cubicle, we find the staff lounge key, which gives us a direction to go to next. Unlocking the staff lounge, the first thing we spot inside is the name Lucy and the number 23 scribbled on the wall right next to it in what seems to be blood. We also pick up a toaster, cause who doesn't love toasted bread while exploring a haunted hospital? But we also find the exam room key here, which we make sure to also take with us. Exploring the rest of the room, we mostly just find extra items, which will help us, as well as a note talking about construction taking place all around the hospital's upper floors, as well as talks about budget cuts and money needing to be saved, but also a reference to something really interesting. There's a mention of a staff party to take place at Annie's Bar. This is an actual location that's present in original Silent Hill 1 as well as Homecoming, so kind of a nice little Easter egg. Making our way back into the hallway, we're now on the search for the exam room, which is conveniently located right at the entrance of the hospital. Inside, we find another letter. This one has been addressed to all staff from Dr. Kaufman, who we ran into earlier. He's telling everybody that they're forbidden from entering his office unaccompanied. Looking around, we check the wall where we see an x-ray machine with a picture of someone's chest. Turning the light on, there is text written all over it with the words Sarah 19. We make sure to write this down as well. Eventually, I spot something really disturbing in the corner. It's an anatomy doll, which are used to teach students where different internal organs can be found. And it seems that we'll be needing to put those plastic body parts that we found into this particular doll. Checking the sinks, we find 2 more pieces, the intestines and the plastic stomach, meaning that we only need 1 more body part to complete this puzzle. Now, to find the final piece, we'll need to go back to the other world using the mirror in the girl's bathroom. We also have to be aware of all the enemies lurking around every corner. This is one of those things with Silent Hill that the higher the difficulty is, the more of these guys you'll run into. The last piece is kind of hard to find until we enter room 204. Now, the first thing I noticed entering this room is the unusual audio that plays in the background. Everything else stops, and all we hear is a faint but relatively clear sound. It's a heartbeat. On the gurney in front of us, there is a note.
This heart of mine troubles me with its trembling. To still it, I have to put it on ice and lock it away. Remember the three beauties who pause it to pump. So are the key, age before beauty.
Now, this is where those names and numbers we got earlier will be needed. See, the names we saw were three women's names, and the numbers were their ages. Amy, 31, Lucy, 23, and Sarah, 19. Typing in 31, 23, 19 into the padlock, the box opens. And inside, we find the final piece. The plastic heart. Picking it up, it's time for us to head back to the anatomy doll in the real world. Quickly rushing back using the mirror. Now we find the doll, we have to insert the body parts in the same order which the student mentioned in the text. Inside Stevie, little Henry lurks. So we start with the intestines, followed by the stomach, liver, heart, and finally the lungs. See, I'll be honest, when the eyes opened, I freaked out while recording this, as it terrified me and caught me off guard twice. Like, I've recorded this game 2 times, and it got me both times. Either way, things have changed. Even the music in the background has become much more somber. Now, picking up the glass eyes, we actually need to use them. Now, some of you may not know this, but there was a door down where we used a golden egg. And this door actually leads to the exam office in the other world. So going there and talking to the statue, it says that even the blind have needs of eyes if they wish to gaze at the future. As such, we insert the glass eyes and the door opens up. Now we find ourselves having access to the exam office from earlier, but in the other world. Entering inside, we find a mutilated corpse of one of the nurses, with a scalpel which we can actually pick up conveniently close by. Travis even points out that she's been cut open and her eyes are missing, similar to the eyes missing from the doll, which we removed just a few minutes prior. Travis even wonders to himself what kind of monster could have done this, making me wonder, were we responsible for the eyes being removed? Or was it perhaps Dr. Kaufman to blame? We look towards the only door that can be opened, and as we enter it, this happens. We instantly get ambushed by the game's first mini-boss of sorts. Now, this is the straitjacket, which isn't too difficult to defeat, as we're able to stab it multiple times and hit it using a hammer, with a final blow actually killing it. However, the straitjacket NPC is an interesting one. It's able to use a grappling move, which then allows it to attach itself to us while spewing acid onto Travis. This makes it quite annoying of an enemy to deal with, and it's better just to keep our distance from it if we're trying to kill it normally. As for its design, it seems to possibly be based on a real human in a straitjacket, and when it attaches itself to you, it almost looks like it's trying to, well, hump you. After defeating it, we get our hands on the future piece. Now, this is where that triangle from earlier makes a reappearance. The same pentagram and inscription we found in the burning house and the triangle on the save location are all present here at once. The girl from earlier makes an appearance again, but before Travis can force her to give him some answers, a loud siren noise forces him to pass out. Waking up again, Travis is no longer in the doctor's office, and we instead find ourselves at the front desk, talking to the second only human being so far in this hospital, Lisa Garland.
No, I'm just... Nice to meet you, Lisa.
You sure you're okay?
I've been a little off all day. I was in a fire last night.
How awful. I heard about that. No one knows how it got started. And that poor girl, Alessa Gillespie.
Now, thanks to Lisa, we've now learned the real name of the girl. Her name is Alessa, and for those familiar with Silent Hill, you will know her from the original Silent Hill 1, being a girl that was sacrificed by her mother and a cult that she ran.
Dr. Kaufman wants to meet me over at Cedar Grove Sanitarium, and he'll be mad if I'm late.
And we also now know where our next direction is. It's going to be the Cedar Grove Sanitarium. But I have to point out that this is a prequel to Silent Hill 1, which is why Alessa appears to be a child. Either way, after quickly saving, we head to the back exit of the hospital, getting back into the streets of Silent Hill. Exiting the hospital, one of the first things we do is pick up a health potion, and of course I have to check the hospital trash cans, because like a Pokemon fan, I need to see if it holds any treasure. As we run around the street corners, we pick up loads of items while exploring, but something has changed. See, the mini-boss known as the Straitjacket is now all around us, and it's best to just avoid him and not fight him. Since most roads are closed off and it's just an infinite void, we eventually make it to the butcher's. Outside, there are blood trails, which we can follow leading us to the entrance. Inside, we save our game, but we also find a giant meat hook, very famous within Silent Hill. Stepping through the back door, we witness this game's answer to Pyramid Head. This is the Butcher. We watch as he grabs and stabs one of the nurses right in the abdomen. Now, there is a reason for the Butcher's existence and him even being here, but I'll explain that a bit later without spoiling anything. Approaching the body, Travis points out how awful the whole thing is. Kind of weird given the nurses have kept trying to kill us for the last few minutes, so it's a bit odd. We continue on our way to the only place that might hold some answers, the Sanitarium, which is at the eastern edge of Silent Hill. On our way there, we find some ammunition, but no gun to actually use, which probably should be an indication that we might be getting our hands on a weapon soon. We also run across the Carrion. This is the third enemy type so far in this game, and this creature resembles almost a skinned cow that's limping on its back legs. Now, it's easy to avoid them because they are very slow, but they do have decent range, so we should always try to keep a distance from them, or if we're gonna try to kill one, just use a ranged weapon. But for the most part, avoiding is the best. For now, we run through the gardens that lead to the Sanitarium. As we get to the entrance, we go inside. This is Cedar Grove Sanitarium. Now, the first thing we notice is that it has the same kind of vibe as the hospital. Everything's abandoned, but this place is also littered with strange paintings of people, but also really weird posters, with a strange poster titled PTSD with a text asking if it's fact or fiction. Now, this is kind of odd, but also makes sense for the time frame this game would be taking place, because back in the day, PTSD was really not even considered a real illness for the longest time. There is also another poster mentioning hypnotherapy, which is a form of treatment to unlock your full potential, apparently. Entering the West Solarium, we find a chair with restraints on it, but also a creepy little doll, as well as our first ranged gun. Now in Origins, that is the target pistol. Now, using the ammo we found outside earlier, we reload it, but it's best to save bullets that we have for much later. However, we don't have a map yet, so we're gonna have to head to the East Solarium. And here, we find a letter from a guy called Dr. Harris, talking about a patient that seems to continue harboring strong fantasies and a violent persecution complex, mentioning the subject to be a female. However, when we look at her name, it seems to be blurred out. On the other table, we actually find the map, and now we have a better overview of this place, and it is huge! I'm gonna tell you right now, this is the most infuriating part of the game. Like, the Sanitarium is awful. I think most people hate this place because it has too many floors and it's too complicated. Now, for us next, we have to head to the second floor, and here we're gonna have to go to unpiece what exactly is going on here.
You were at the fire. I saw you there.
Of course you did. That was my house, burning. My daughter, Alessa. You were the one who saved her.
Yeah. She was your daughter? Why did you leave her? Why did no one help? You all left that girl to burn.
So we did. The world is stranger than you think.
You're crazy. What happened to her? Lisa said she was dead.
Alessa is with those who care for her. Do not trust her, Travis. She does not know what she is doing.
How do you know my name? Hey, answer me.
This is Dahlia Gillespie. She is one of the 3 antagonists from the original Silent Hill 1. She was a member of a fanatical cult known as the Brethren, and alongside them, she tried to sacrifice her daughter Alessa, who's somebody we keep running into. So it's starting to make a bit more sense. That ritual we saw, that was the sacrifice of her daughter. She sees her daughter as almost some form of demon that can be used to summon their god. So far, we haven't really interacted much with Dahlia besides back at the house, and it seems like she's trying to stop us from making progress and saving Alessa. After she leaves, we make our way from the stairs up to the 2nd floor, and here we run into the most infuriating and honestly terrifying enemy in Silent Hill, that being the Remnants. Now, these guys only appear in the Cedar Grove Sanitarium, and when they are seen in light, they take the form of a bloody harness. So they're basically invisible, and they're kind of easy to avoid, but will attack if you actually shine light upon them. Now, when we shine our light on this one, they do come across as a shadow or a shadow man far off on the walls, but once you defeat them, they take on a more physical form, as they will appear like a crumbled up black mass on the ground. Heading into the mezzanine area, we avoid the nurses, and we go over to the TB ward. And here we find something a bit different. The device found inside is the iron lung. It's actually a machine which was used in real life to keep patients that had polio alive back in the day, as the disease would shut down their bodies, and with the machine being needed to keep their organs functioning. There are still a few people in the real world who still have to live in one of these things, which is really unfortunate. On the front of the machine, we found a little note. It says out of use, and it was written by Dr. Harris, who's warning anyone against using the machine, as it seems that patients have had their lives taken by it by overloading the valves. Ignoring Dr. Harris's note, Travis, like the badass he is, messes with the valves anyways. Okay, let's get back on track. On the top left, there is a list of things we need to follow for the machine to actually work correctly, with the 4th and final point on this list simply being to have fun, which doesn't really fit with such a serious device, which makes me wonder what kind of sinister person would even write that there. But next, we need to solve this puzzle. We start by pressing the first button 2 times, then the 3rd button 2 times, and finally the 5th button 2 times. At the end of the machine, it spits out a new item. It's the basement key. With it in hand, we head back through the stairs and make it towards the basement entrance, using the key to unlock it. However, on the other side, we're instantly faced off against enemies wandering the halls. We avoid them and enter one of the storage rooms, where we pick up the drip stand. So yeah, I guess this is about time to bring up this game's combat. See, I've already talked about it a little bit. By Silent Hill Origins, you have 4 different ways to handle enemies. Either you can fight them with your fists, for the first time in the franchise, which actually fits the more rugged nature of a character like Travis. We can also use close-range weapons, and there are many varieties of different weapons. You can even use a toaster. Also, somehow Travis is able to carry about 7 toasters and a Apache helicopter in his inventory. Then there's, of course, ranged weapons and all sorts of guns. But the best tool in this game is the ability to run away. So yeah, he has pretty low stamina, but it doesn't really matter. Running away is still the best choice. Which is a good point to also bring up that I played the prototype version of this game. It's actually available, somebody leaked it on the internet, which shows you what the original ID was for Silent Hill Origins. It was supposed to look more like kind of Resident Evil from an over-the-shoulder view, and you going around just being a badass killing zombies, more or less, which luckily they scrapped that whole ID, and I'll talk a little bit more about this original prototype at the end of the video. After some looking around, we find the second stairs, which are needed to exit the basement, and as soon as we do, the jarring music stops. Even though I know I'm safe in this exact place, the ambient noise around me does still keep me on the edge, and this is one of the best things about these games. It's just the sound design. Going back upstairs, we run past some nurses guarding this area before making our way into the female hydrotherapy room. Hydrotherapy being a therapeutic treatment used for both external and internal treatments of various diseases. Travis observes the rusty scales, pointing out that he doesn't need to know how much he weighs.
I'll have 2 number 9s.
But I do! I need to know, how much does he weigh with all those toasters? Looking down into one of the hydrotherapy baths, we see a key, but Travis observes that the water is boiling hot, so we can't reach for it. Instead, we click the giant green button on the side, and we manage to drain the bathtub, but in the process, the key goes down as well. So now we have to hunt for that key, but before we leave the hydrotherapy room, we observe some strange marks on the ground, leading all the way to the bath itself, almost like tire tracks, similar to those of a large truck having to swerve out of the way, which is a bit odd. Outside, we meet a straitjacket, and to make sure he doesn't get us, we turn right and enter the female treatment room. Inside are just a few beds, but also a phone. Interestingly, looking through the mirror here, we see on the other side ourselves, but also the other world as clear as day. Touching the mirror, we transport over to the other side. With a tiny creepy doll on the bed in front of us, holding ammo, similar to the doll we saw earlier where we found our target pistol. Now, it's interesting because these dolls are a bit reminiscent of the dolls used by therapists for comfort and emotional support. You know, the one, point where he touched you. Basically, it reminds me of one of those. So in some way, the target pistol and ammo we find by the dolls serve as a sort of comfort, as arming ourselves will keep us safer because for now, we need to find the key, so we head down the stairs to the first floor. Now, to find the key, we need to check the female toilets and the pipes. However, on our way, the screen changes and we hear a voice.
I've always hated you! You and your devil son!
Oh God, Helen! My dear Helen! You really are dead! What will I do?
This is where things are starting to click a bit more, and if you've already figured it out, well done. But the person talking is a woman named Helen, and she seems to be attacking a man and his son. It's just odd. Why would Travis be hearing this? Does it have anything to do with the notes we read upstairs from Dr. Harris about a woman losing her grip with reality? And why did our screen turn purple? Now, usually when we change between the real world, the fog world, and the other world, we can clearly see the differences, but this was something else. This was something different. Heading inside of the female toilets, oh boy, we go to the only open cubicle. However, we cannot pass it as there is barbed wire all around it. Instead, we use the mirror to go back to the real world. This time, the toilet is no longer blocked by the wire, and observing the pipes, we can hear the chingling and ringing of the metal sound coming from inside of the pipe. And interestingly, a really cool detail is if you listen to the game's audio, you can actually hear the chingling. Which is such a small little detail that just immerses me more in this game. Flushing the toilet, the ringing stops, and whatever was stuck is now gone. Now, there is a little detail here that I didn't notice when I played through the game the second time, but only during the PlayStation 2 version, which is that if you look on the floor, the camera changes and you can see the following words. Bring me my son, and it seems to be written in blood, potentially from that razor wire we saw. So yeah, I wonder if this was written by Helen. And again, this is something I didn't really notice in the PSP version. I'll be honest, for the next 30 minutes, I got totally lost and I had no idea where to go next. Eventually figuring out that I needed to go to the female dorm room number 5. Inside, it seemed really calm, with ammunition and weapons scattered about, but also a patient belongings key found on one of the beds. With the key in hand, we head over to the room named Patient Belongings. Interestingly, as we approach the door, the sound changes, and it almost sounds as if there's a large crowd of people behind the door. Here we find more ammo, but also another note by Dr. Harris. See, it's in regards to a woman, whose name is once again redacted, but it could be the Helen lady we heard about earlier. Reading the paper, it seems to be very insistent on the woman having fantasies of a mirror world, which sounds very familiar to the other world, which we've already been exploring. Further down the note, there is also the mention of her having a full recollection of attacking her son, so now at least we know what she did. Now, given that the voice we heard earlier was aggressive against the man and his son, we can only assume that these two are related. Picking up a typewriter once again, we add it to our inventory, and in the back of the room we find another mirror. Back in the other world, we also find the game's shotgun, a perfect weapon for the claustrophobic space we have to fight in through the Sanitarium. It's so useful and does so much damage. With the weapons in hand, we can now get the key that went through the pipes. So, descending through the stairs, we reach the East Pipe Room. Inside, there's a vat of literal goo, but also the key, labeled the Interview Archives Key. Using the mirror we find in the closest storage room, we go up to the second floor where we can enter the archives.
I had to do it.
You had to? Please, help me understand.
It's the woman again, Helen. She calls the boy a pest, and she seems to keep bringing up the same stuff that we heard from Alessa's mother about the devil being in her son.
Always has been. I tried to pretend he wasn't, but they were there to make sure I didn't forget.
They?
The people in the mirrors.
She talks about the mirror world, which is really interesting because that would be the other world that we keep exploring, but that's not all. She also talks about having to do it to almost protect the world from her own flesh and blood.
Responsibility. My flesh and blood. I brought him into this world, so I had to take him out of it. Good wombs can bear bad sons, they say. I know you think what I did was wrong.
I just want to understand. Helen.
No! You want to keep
Of course, Harris has taken all of this as delusion, but given everything we've gone through, I don't know if Helen was totally wrong about what she thought or what she saw, but still, going after her own son does make her sound a lot more like Dahlia, because she did the same thing to Alessa. The room we're inside of is filled to the brim with old film tapes. These would be recordings similar to those used in real life to record patients with mental and psychosomatic conditions. With everything sorted out here, we go to the other world. This time we need to find the infirmary, which requires us to run down to the basement a few times, but eventually we reach it. Here there is a save point, so that probably means something important is about to take place. Looking around the room, Travis remarks that most of the stuff doesn't interest him. However, there's a strange puzzle found here. On the table, there's a set of creepy dolls, which each of them requiring certain pills to be moved into the right location. However, for us to know exactly which pill goes where, we need to explore the male ward, the only place we haven't gone to yet. Heading inside of the male seclusion room, we find a baton and a paper. On it, we see different medication, and a message telling us, do not mess up. So, obviously the baton was by somebody working as a security guard. As for the note though, it points out that room 1 needs, well, I'm not going to try to butcher this, trizanithium? Room 2 needs natium, room 3 oporium, room 4 solarium, and room 5 needing natium as well. With a cliff note on the paper saying that pills are for the patients only, to make sure that no teenagers on duty decide to get high. I mean, hey. Entering the first door, we find a table filled with razor blades and bandages with blood covering all of it. Trying to enter the second door, we aren't able to, but we're able to observe that the door is burnt and scorched black. Checking the third door, however, it has a room filled with perfume bottles and a creepy mannequin with a poker sticking out of it. The fourth door, however, is heavily barred, meaning we can't enter it, leaving us with only the last and final fifth door. Inside of here, we're able to notice a table filled with uneaten food and plates rotting away. It's safe to assume that whoever was in this room was not eating all the food left for them. Checking the scales, it also seems that the scale has seen a lot of use. I'm gonna go out on a whim here and make the guess that this room belonged to a patient with 1 or 2 different disorders. This one in particular seems to have been a patient possibly suffering from an eating disorder and anorexia. This is somewhat evident given the overuse of the scale and all the uneaten food. If we examine the first 4 rooms as well, we can probably determine that the razor blades from the first room were used for some sort of self-harm, given all the blood. While the second door was burnt and charred, and maybe that person was suffering from pyromania, being someone who basically just wants to set everything ablaze. However, the mannequin room as well as the barred room were both the two that I just couldn't figure out. For now, we rush back to the infirmary. Looking at the dolls again, we need to match the doors that we saw to the rooms, but also match up the pills to each of them. The first figure with knives was from the 4th room, which was heavily barred. This could be a sort of serial killer, given the knives. For this one, we used a green pill. For the second figure with the burns, this one matches up perfectly with room 2. That was the charred to a crisp room. So here we use a blue pill. Now the third figure looks malnourished, which fits with room 5 with all the uneaten food, so we use a blue pill as well. Next is figure 4 with the razor blades. This is from the first room we checked, so we give this doll the red pill. Finally, we have the last doll, which looks like a man with a mustache wearing a dress. For this one, we use a yellow pill. With the puzzle completed, the box opens, and inside, we find Dr. Harris's key. This is the same doctor writing all the notes about Helen, so it's time to head to his office. To get there, we need to travel through the mirror to the normal world. On the other side, we find another note. It mentions a report against a staff member for letting a male child enter the sanitarium without permission, making their way to the female ward, specifically to room 5. It mentions that the orderly, or the worker, who did the job at that night, not locking that particular door. This might be the child belonging to Helen, but also the child which she considered to be taken by the devil. Making it to Dr. Harris's office, we find another note outside of it, which was the solution for finding the key. But for now, we need to ignore that and unlock the door. Inside, we find an object, the Jocasta artifact, named after Jocasta, the queen of Thebes, from Greek mythology. Interestingly, Jocasta within Greek mythology was said to have had an oracle warn her that her child would kill his father and sleep with his mother. And to prevent this from happening, her and her husband left their first baby, their firstborn, on a mountain to die. Not too dissimilar to Helen, who seems to have had the same fear towards her own son. We find another note.
The new patient, Helen Grady, arrived today. I was surprised to see how calm and well-behaved she was.
It all makes sense now. Helen Grady. This is Travis's mother, and all the notes, all the connections, the purple memories, they all make sense now. It was Travis's own mother that was locked up inside the sanitarium for having tried to kill Travis. The note continues.
After reading her notes, I was worried that she might be something of a handful. The woman is in complete denial and claims no recollection of the incident which saw her committed. Indeed, she has asked repeatedly to be allowed to see her son. I've agreed with her husband that it's best that the boy be kept away from his mother. While there seems to be little hope for any long-term recovery, I look forward to spending some time with Miss Grady. Her condition is most fascinating.
Things are a bit more clear now. It seems Travis has been harboring repressed memories of his own mother's abuse. And I guess this is the reason why Alessa decided to use him, because they share a similar fate. Both of them were abused by their mothers. Both of them suffered underneath their parents' hands. So maybe that's why Alessa decided to reach out to Travis. Even though she's basically torturing him, she reached out to him for help. What I like about this reveal is that the first time I played the game, I didn't really realize what was going on. I thought it was all related to Alessa, but when reading the notes and having the music kick in to match the reveal, it was actually kind of catching me off guard. This might explain why Travis is so determined to find and save the burnt girl, as she was harmed the same way he was as a child. Exiting the door from the office, we find a children's drawing on the ground. It's brand new, it just showed up. It states, Daddy, Mama, and Travis, with a children's painting of a house in the back. Heading back into the female toilets again, using the mirror to reach the other world. Heading up to the female seclusion entrance, we hear voices from the other side. Here, we can use the Jocasta artifact to make the door unlock. It's Lisa again.
Lisa? You're here too? Can you see all this stuff? Is it all dark for you too?
It's so sad. They can't do anything for her. She just sits there. She wants her boy so badly.
Who are you talking about?
Now, I'm not exactly sure why Lisa is here or if she actually did know Travis's mom while she stayed at the sanitarium, but we're just gonna let that pass. Instead, we hear a thumping by the door that just gets louder and louder. And the music has gotten very bassy and even darker than usual, with the room around us having the walls filled with children's drawings. some of them having a child with devil horns on it. He asks, what is it? A monster? A child? Some of the drawings seem to have one character always being scribbled out. It's time for us to enter the 5th room.
Mama? Daddy said you were dead. Are you dead? I'm not dead. Locked away. Out of sight, out of mind, not dead. I asked them to bring my boy to me.
Mama.
Come here, boy. Let Mama take a look at you.
This is Mama, the first real boss in Silent Hill Origins, and honestly, one of the saddest ones. Now, the Mama boss is a disturbing and monstrous representation of Travis's mother, Helen Grady, with her design being quite unique. She doesn't look much like a woman anymore, emblematic of her being different than the woman Travis remembers from his earlier years, but she's also confined in an iron cage representing the sanitarium where she's been locked up, with the darkest part of her design being her mouth, as it's permanently held open by different wires throughout her mouth, as if she's constantly screaming, which is maybe what Alessa was referring to. And the metal cage she's inside of seems to be based on a gibbeting, which is an old execution tool used to punish criminals, which is fitting given what she did was criminal, the act of trying to kill her own son. For this battle, the best strategy is just to move from corner to corner while firing off as many bullets as we can. Her movements are quite fast, faster than most Silent Hill bosses, and she uses a gray gas spray attack at times, which maybe is supposed to represent the filthy words that she would just throw at Travis whenever she was angry at him. She also performs a grappling attack, similar to the straitjacket, but the worst is when she flails around with her large spikes that are found underneath her dress. Spamming off multiple bullets from our target pistol though, and the shotgun, we're able to defeat her pretty quickly, and we don't take too much damage. In front of us, we have another Phaloris puzzle piece. It's called the Past Piece, probably relating to how we've gone into Travis's past to face off against one of his demons, in this case being the memory of his mother's attempted murder of him.
This is just like before. What's happening here? That thing, it couldn't have been. Are you making this happen?
Alessa is here again, and for the 3rd time, she kicks us down with the sirens.
Don't go. I need to know.
Once more, Travis awakens back in his sofa. This time, we're in the reception of the sanitarium. Heading to the front door, we find a ticket on the table, which wasn't here previously. It's a theater ticket, so we pick it up. Leaving Cedar Grove, we're back on the streets of Silent Hill. But I have to take a minute to say that I think that the sanitarium part of Origins is probably the weakest one. The hospital felt a little bit more concise, but the sanitarium and the constant backtracking from one floor to another is honestly just so not fun. It's just not enjoyable, and the remnant enemy shadows are definitely just a personal annoyance of mine. However, I think the storytelling in this place works really well, giving us small pieces and hints towards who Travis actually is and his past was done really well. I enjoyed it. I just wish I didn't have to go between 4 different floors to find a key. Moving on, we check a running car right outside of the sanitarium entrance. It's the lumberyard key, which means our next destination is now clear. On our way to the lumberyard, most of the paths are blocked, so we need to pass through the butcher's shop again. However, it seems the nurse that was cut open through the head previously is now gone, with only a long blood trail left in her wake. Following the blood trail, we reach the front entrance where we find a bottle cap with the text,
"Help me," inscribed on it.
Exiting the door, we find the nurse's body right outside where the blood trail ends. Her body has been ripped apart, and she was just left here, almost like trash. This is the moment where the game really caught me off guard. It started to feel more real this way. The feeling like someone, in this case the butcher, is wandering around these streets and will eventually catch us. And if he did this to the nurse, I can only imagine what he might do to us. Getting to the lumberyard, we enter inside. With the place being mostly empty, lacking enemies, the music also changes to just be an odd, screeching noise. Here we find a newspaper resting on some logs. It has writing on it.
Why are you helping her, Travis? Did you see that nurse?
I wasn't too sure who wrote this, but the assumption from me is that Dahlia wrote this as another warning to tell us to stop helping Alessa. And she's implying that the death of the nurse was caused by her daughter rather than the butcher, which doesn't really make sense to me. Exiting the lumberyard, we're back on the streets once more. Most of the paths are blocked off, forcing us to head towards the Greenfield Apartments. Reaching the parking lot in front of the giant apartment complex, we find another blood trail, so we follow it. But before that, one of the straitjackets decides to hump the shit out of us, so we knock it off with a few quicktime events. Leaving, we continue following the blood. It leads us to an apartment. Entering the first one, we find an empty and rotten home, with a toaster and a screwdriver on the kitchen desk. We also restock tons of target pistol ammo by the sofa. Entering one of the bedrooms, the blood trail ends. On the bed, we find the mutilated body of one of the straitjacket enemies, with its middle section cut up, similar to the cut a doctor would make when dissecting a corpse or performing a surgery. On the ground, there's also a razor, so this possibly could be the weapon used to rip up this poor fella. Over by the bedside table, there is a napkin with text on it written,
"Someone made a hole. Go home, Travis."
This message is a bit weird, and I couldn't figure it out at first. Instead, I go to the bathroom, and we find a health kit, as well as a giant hole. And I guess this is what the note was referring to. A hole. A both literal hole, but also a metaphorical way to tell us that we are about to dive deeper and into a more darker place from here on out. And so, we take the plunge down the rabbit hole. Downstairs, we find the apartment entrance, with the mailbox for room 213 being filled to the brim with mail, which seems to have not been collected for several weeks. Leaving through the entrance door, we find new ammo types. This is service pistol ammo, and the fact that we just found it probably means that we shouldn't be far from finding the gun itself. We also find rifle ammo, so we could be running into 2 guns not too long from now. A thing I also noticed is the obvious lack of enemies anywhere, and things seem calm. Too calm, almost. Trying to head down the road to escape, we are stopped, as Travis realizes he has to check the theater first, because that's the ticket we have. With it in hand, we go to the box office ticket slot and put it inside. The doors unlock. Inside, we find a giant theater, the Artaud Theater, a name probably derived from Antonin Artaud, a French artist who's actually famous for pioneering what is referred to as the theater of cruelty. Now, this fella thought that most people's problems stem from their unconsciousness, which isn't too dissimilar from our friend Travis here, who is dealing with some clear repressed memories and traumas within his unconscious. But Artaud was a very avant-garde man who was known for his raw and very explosive themes, loving to delve into philosophy and even the occult. So, having his name be the namesake for the theater is honestly perfect. Checking the entrance hall of the theater, we find loads of posters, with the name of a play being listed, The Tempest, which is actually based on a real play by Shakespeare by the same name. Now, one of the things that actually stands out within the real Tempest play is that the whole thing takes place during a single day. And for now, it has felt like everything happening has been done within the span of only a few hours. But the biggest theme of The Tempest and the play has got to be the theme of betrayal. Moving around, we pick up the theater map. Exploring further, we also find a Hamlet poster and a play about Julius Caesar. Checking one of the boards, there's a letter with a specific word being highlighted in red. Caliban has it in his cave. What is the Caliban? With everything sorted, we're ready, and it's time for us to enter the auditorium. Inside, we walk down the rows when we run into Lisa again, and her actions are a bit different as opposed to what we would expect from her. She's acting overtly sexual, which is really weird.
It's dangerous.
Dangerous? You're kidding. The door was open, so I let myself in. I just love the theater, Travis. I want to be an actress. But Mom was a nurse and her mom was a nurse, so I'm going to be a nurse. I've got what it takes, though. I can't stop thinking about you, Travis. I want you. You're all I think about. Let's get the hell out of this crazy town. run off. The two of us. We could be so good together.
I don't know exactly why Lisa behaved the way she did, but for now we just need to move on. Walking around the stage, we find a back room to enter, and this one will lead us to the curtain controls. However, inside we also discover a odd thing. It's a puppet, and to Travis it looks like someone was repairing it, but to me, it just screams of danger. Now, I mostly say this as when we entered the room, the puppet's body was right in our peripheral view. Similar to how in horror movies, the entity or monster will often show up in an off angle or even a Dutch angle of sorts to induce a sense of fear and discomfort. Walking across the stage, we have another memory. This time, it was one about someone called Tony, who seems to have been one of the performers of the Tempest play that was taking place in the auditorium at some point in time.
Chide thee, if not hate thee. What? An advocate for an impossible. Hush. Thou thinkest there is no more such.
You okay, Tony?
Yes. Yes. Fine. Just a headache. The damn's nosebleed. You mind if we stop for a moment?
Which is a bit weird because this memory doesn't really match much with Travis, which makes me wonder, who does this memory belong to? Finally, we reach the curtain control room, which also serves as a saving hub, giving us that much needed break and preparation time, which means we're about to run into enemies, no doubt. Reading one of the notes on the table, we learned that the safety curtains can only be moved if we fixed these safety circuits, as they seem to all be connected, so we have our mission. Entering the east hallway, something eerie is going down, and we can hear the noise of something rattling in the distance. See, I told you that these guys were going to be enemies. Now, this monster is the Aerials. These enemy types are shaped just like puppets and be hanging upside down, but the most interesting part is that their feet have been removed and replaced by another pair of hands. So in some way, these puppets are controlling themselves. Now, these enemies are honestly the most terrifying to me, and they will work in groups of 2 to 3, which makes them extremely difficult to deal with. But it is possible to just turn off your light and don't make too much noise to avoid them, because then they will not notice you. And just like most characters or enemies in Silent Hill, the Aerials are based on a specific thing, possibly the character of Ariel, who was a servant of the same name from the Tempest play. So we have a connection to the Tempest play already. So the themes are staying consistent throughout this place. Avoiding the Aerial, we rush over to the director's office, where we also find ourselves the Sun Totem, and finally, the Service Pistol, a weapon that is much stronger than the target gun we've been using so far. Besides that, there's also once again a note on this table, probably owned by the theater's director. It seems to be a sort of schedule, with Monday mostly being about the director's happiness over the costumes. On Tuesday, however, there is a mention of a girl, possibly could be Alessa, having snuck inside of the theater, but she also seems to have gotten terrified by the Caliban. This is the same thing that was mentioned in that letter we read in the beginning of the theater. The rest of the text mentions this girl being allowed to sit through and watch the walkthrough of the play, but that she seemed to dislike Prospero, which is the main character of the play. I think things are a bit more clear. That memory we saw earlier is possibly from Alessa, and if she has some sort of powers, and with her dislike for the main lead, she may have caused Tony to get a nosebleed because she just didn't like him. Exploring the rest of the back rooms, we find the men's dressing room. Here we also have a mirror, which we can use to transport ourselves to the other world. On top of that, we also find one of the strangest weapons, a katana of all things.
Wake the fuck up, samurai.
I have the power of God and anime on my side.
Before we go back through the mirror, we actually find another note. This one is possibly from Tony, one of the actors, as it mentions small details about the different characters of the play, as a way for him to remember them. I also take this moment to check through our inventory really quickly, where I discover an item I hadn't even seen before. It's something called the Lucky Quarter. Now, Travis says he has had this since he was a kid, from when his parents died, and he sees it as a sort of lucky charm. But it also has something scratched into it, which seems to be the number 61. For now, this doesn't really mean a lot, but hopefully the answers to it will be clear eventually. Finally, we enter the other world. Once again, the music is terrifying, and the room has lost any sense of life to it. Outside the dressing room, the aerials are back at it again. This time, 2 of them hunt us. With every door being locked, the only place to enter is once again the director's office. This time, we actually find a balcony corridor key inside of it, as well as some extra ammo, which is always nice. With the key in hand, we have a general idea where to go, but to get there, we'll need to use the mirror to the real world again inside of the men's dressing room. On the way, we do get caught by one of the puppets, and oh, these things are awful to deal with. Seriously, they're just so hard to, knock off, and you have to do quick time events, which is a little bit annoying to get out of their grasp. Back in the normal world, we backtrack all the way towards the lobby, where we take a west side stair to the 2nd floor. And here, we make sure to unlock the balcony corridor. Once more, we're faced off by one of the aerials, and this one isn't hanging from the ceiling, but it's rather walking on its hands and using its leg limbs to attack us. It's really bizarre. We take it down with the use of the service pistol and our fists. A little cool, or I guess rather grim detail is that all the enemies in Origins will bleed. Even the dolls, which you would expect to be made out of plastic, as we leave behind a whole blood trail on our shoes walking away from it. Once we've unlocked the balcony corridor, we make our way to the lightbox room. Inside, there are several items to acquire. Multiple of these are light bulbs, all of which have different watts on them. We find another note, and this one is from a character called Eric. This is the same person we read the first note from, addressed to someone called Peter. And this one talks about having to make sure we have all the light bulbs, or else the lights won't work, or the circuits might blow up. We make sure to write down the information that he provides in the note, as it might be needed for the lights later down the line. Entering the east hallway, we run into a straitjacket, which unlike the puppets, is a tad more annoying to deal with, as it will attack us no matter what we do, even if we turn off the light. So after wasting some of our health, we defeat it using a poker, which normally is something you use for stoking a fire, but hey, it's sharp so it works. With every other door being blocked, we head down the stairs to the 1st floor, where we defeat another straitjacket, they're everywhere, and find the moon totem, which means we have both the sun and the moon one now. Starting to wonder if I'm playing Pokemon rather than Silent Hill.
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
With both totems in our possession, we head quickly towards the men's dressing room, where we transport to the other world. And I've got to say, the other world in general just serves as a perfect way for us to unlock certain rooms and ways to get into areas that just aren't available in the normal world. So going back upstairs to where the door was previously locked, on the way we run into a carry-on, which we have seen multiple times in the streets of Silent Hill previously, but they are just generally easy to avoid because they're slow. They just have really long reach though. However, the worst thing has got to be what we face off against next. It's 3 puppets. Now, since they are blocking our path, it makes sense to kill each of them. So I just started blasting. With all the monsters dead, we check the door in front of us. There seems to be indents where we can fit the totems that we found earlier. And there's also some text. I am a child torn by twin desires. I stand before a door. My right hand calls to the light. My left hand ushers in darkness. It seems this gives us the answer as to where we should put each of the stones, but this little text also seems to be speaking about the simple concept of good and evil existing within a single person. Putting the moon totem on the left and the sun totem on the right, the door opens up. Here we have to head up some very steep stairs, where we reach a hallway blocked off by another carry-on. In the northern hallway, there's also a storage room which has another mirror. But before we enter that mirror, we explore the rest of the hallway itself. At the end of it, we actually find a giant totem, one that would have been used by Native Americans, and also a hunting rifle, meaning that the bullets we found outside are gonna finally come to use. Heading back to the storage room, we can now use the mirror to go back to the normal world. Or at least as normal as it gets in Silent Hill of all places. We once again find another note, and this time the text on it is very strange. It talks about what happened to Tony, and that the person who wrote it has been dreaming more about a certain someone, the Butcher, and that he looks just like another monster, the Executioner, apparently. The person also mentions him being at this person's motel. I guess we know where to go once we've sorted out the stuff in the theater. For now, we head out and move towards the catwalk, where we can take on the spotlight puzzle. So here there are 4 spotlights, all marked with A to D, right? That's the letters. Now the note about wiring says that we need to make sure that the wattage of B has to be half of the wattage of D, and the wattage of A plus B must not exceed C, and finally D must not exceed A. So with the bulbs in place, we pull the lever and the lights are on. Now this puzzle is not that complicated, but the first time I messed it up and I didn't really get what I was supposed to do, so I had to find the note again and actually get it right. It's a little bit of an annoying puzzle, a little bit of math, but it's not that complicated. This means that the switch in the control room should now also work, so we head down there really quickly. Inside the room, we pull the lever and the sound of the curtains can be heard. Heading onto the stage, there's a giant mirror facing us. Now, we can actually interact with it to go to the other side, but before we do that, we go to the props control, which pretty much controls all the props on stage. We pull the top left and the second right lever, which brings in a tree onto the stage. But that's not all. As the props appear, we also see an actual real tree appear on the other side in the other world. Entering the mirror, we find ourselves on the other side, where we are now in a forest, and walking around, everything just looks disgusting. In one of the trees, there's even a hollow indent that's just bloody, but it holds the stage office key. As I stepped away and I look at the tree again, I noticed it kind of looks like a straitjacket is hanging upside down with its arms removed from its body. On our way out, we actually get another memory of another theater performance.
The aisle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give the light a hurt knock. Sometimes 1,000 clangling instruments will hum.
It seems like this is the memory of Alessa. She's just remembering the rehearsal performance when she snuck inside of the theater.
And then, in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches, ready to drop upon me. Then, when I waked, I cried to dream again.
Now that we have the key, we head to the office. But the thing is, on the way there, we run into a ton of enemies, trying to avoid all of them without losing too much health. However, a really strange thing happens. Entering the office, we actually run into another one of the puppets. Now, this was a bit surprising, as normally, these guys are not found in these rooms. Like, that's one of the things that actually makes me feel safe entering small rooms, is that I don't expect there to be many enemies there. Inside the stage office, we find the final missing piece. It's the prop control lever, which we add to our inventory. Rushing back to the main stage, where we can now insert it into the stage controls. Pulling the second lever on the left, a cave appears on the stage, and pulling the third lever on the right, we summon in what seems to be the prop of an animal skin. This is it, guys. It's time for us to enter the mirror once again. Checking the thing that came down, it's a weird costume, probably the one for the monster in the actual play. But for now, let's enter the mirror. Alright, so this is the thing we were waiting for. The giant in front of us is the Caliban. Now, this is the creature that was mentioned at the note in the beginning of the theater. But this creature is also mentioned in the play itself. This is the son of a sorceress in the Shakespeare play, The Tempest. As for its appearance, in this case, it looks like a contorted human figure, walking on all fours with its back legs being its front legs. Now, according to the notes we read in the men's dressing room, the actual design of this thing is supposed to be based around a native buffalo spirit, which actually explains the Native American totem where we found a hunting rifle. It also did seem like Alessa was terrified of this thing based on the notes and the memories we saw. Another detail that actually you wouldn't notice about the Caliban unless you played both the PSP and the PlayStation 2 version is that in one version of the game, particularly in this case, the PSP one, you can actually see its fully exposed head with a bunch of bloody holes around it, and especially on its body as well. Whereas in the PlayStation 2 version, there are bandages on its head and legs, and no holes can be seen. Now, why they did this change, I'm not exactly sure of. As for the battle with the Caliban, it only really uses two attacks. One where it smashes the ground, and one where its hind legs are used to attack us, which does incredible amount of damage if it hits. So, the best course of action is just to start blasting, baby! I honestly find that this fight isn't the most interesting, as the Caliban is relatively slow, and both times I fought it, I was able to defeat it mostly thanks to the spamming of my weapons. After defeating the Caliban, we find another one of those pieces on the floor. Picking this one up, we learn is the falsehood piece. Now, taking a step back, the name of this piece being Falsehood is a bit odd compared to the other two pieces. It is possible that it could be a warning from Alessa to not trust the people we've been running into in Silent Hill, like Kaufman, Dahlia, and of course also Lisa Garland. Now, if you recall, we had a cutscene at the start of the theater from Lisa where she was pretending to be an actor, and Travis didn't really seem to be comfortable with that. But what she said during that cutscene was something very particular. She talked about running away with Travis, which, according to a famous fan theory, could be a suggested way for the Order, the cult that's running Silent Hill, to get rid of Travis by using some of his own repressed sexual desires against him. Now, we'll talk more about this later, but it is possible this is what she was trying to imply. Alessa is back, and it seems that Travis has realized that she needs the pieces. As we watch her approach us, she even kicks the Caliban, confirming that she was the little girl we heard of about in the notes, as she seems to hate the Caliban for scaring her. But before Travis can do anything, the sirens are heard once more. This time we wake up in the theater entrance hall. On the ground there is a corpse, and it seems to be another one of the puppets. Its face is smiling, which honestly made me feel uneasy. And in its hands we also find the motel key. Picking up the key, Travis reads the name of the motel. Clearly, Travis has done some nasty stuff at that motel, so it's about time we go and figure out what's going on. But first, now that we're done with the theater section, I think it's time to share some thoughts on it. Now, though the theater doesn't hold much in terms of lore or history, I actually found that the puzzle wasn't too complicated and the backtracking actually made sense. Unlike the Sanitarium, where I honestly constantly had to go up and down, the theater was honestly an amazing place to go through. The enemy types were genuinely terrifying. The aerial puppets are just the worst thing to deal with. They're so freaking scary when you play this game late at night. And also, having Lisa wanting to be an actor and telling us about it here in the theater is a little bit, I guess, fitting. But on top of that, also learning about Alessa's past, but it not just being non-stop traumatic, also was kind of cool. And my favorite part is them making a connection between Shakespeare and, of course, Silent Hill. Just having any connections or references is pretty awesome. And this is something that, of course, Silent Hill loves to do. Back on the streets, the fresh smell of Silent Hill fog is once again upon us. Now we have to go to the actual motel, which is the southwestern part of the map. On the way through, we of course see several enemies, including a larger version of enemies we've already seen before. It does take a while to figure out exactly where we need to go, but eventually we reach Andy's bookstore on Kuntz Street. The first thing we see when we enter his bookstore is a sign that says horror. A nice little tongue-in-cheek way of referencing Silent Hill's genre of horror specifically. Walking around the room, we find a bunch of assault rifle ammo, and you already know what that means. Next, we see a cutout figure of a man looking oddly similar to Travis, holding the assault rifle. Picking up the gun, it actually has some flavor text, which refers to it as an Iron Curtain knockoff, referencing, of course, the Soviet Union and the so-called Iron Curtain, which is in regards to Eastern Europe and Western Europe, which wasn't accessible to each other due to the massive Berlin Wall that pretty much split the world in two. Heading to the cash register, we find a letter from Dharma, left for Andy, the bookstore owner, mentioning that they have sold lots of books and that she locked away his keys in the cash register, which doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm not going to question it, saying that the combination is his Greenfield apartment number and wishing him a happy vacation. Now, if we think back to the Greenfield Apartments, that's the place we entered with the dead body on the bed. Thinking about that, when we jumped down the hole, we saw a bunch of boxes. One was filled with letters, so it's safe to assume that the box's number, which was 213, might be the code for this thing, which also explains all the letters Andy had. It was because he was on vacation. Or maybe it was because he was actually dead. Entering the 213 code opens the register, and we get the bookstore key. Using it, we can now go through the back entrance with a brand new Kalashnikov in our inventory. Once more, we're back on the streets, but this time we actually find ourselves back to where our journey began, by the hospital and the bus bench where we originally woke up on. Avoiding the enemies, we rush down the street, but it's blocked off, with the only place for us to enter being the grocery store, which has a giant neon sign to, of course, attract customers, but in this case, it works like a waypoint giving us our directions, which is actually pretty cool. Inside, we stock up on ammo and healing items before making sure we also save. Here we also find a receipt with a rhyme or a poem written on it. Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes the butcher to chop off your head. Yeah, not on the nose whatsoever, am I right? Now, before I exited out of the store's back entrance, I had to take a minute to gasp at and marvel at the big burger sign on the floor. Not gonna lie, I was starving for food when I filmed this video, and I straight up took a break just to go downstairs and get myself a meal. Using the back door, we exit, and the streets are once again blocked off, with us eventually ending up at the scrapyard. And the first thing we find here is a Caliban? Yeah, so just like the straitjackets, once you defeat the Caliban boss battle, you will start seeing it all over the place in the outside world. And on my PlayStation 2 playthrough, I never actually even went into the scrapyard because it was too dark. The streets are mostly empty, there are loads of items spread around, but eventually we reach the actual car entrance to the motel. However, it's closed, so we have to enter through a small gate on the side, where we can now use the motel key to open the storeroom. Alright, now it makes sense. Travis actually lived here previously, and he must have checked in with his own dad into this location at some point. Reading the note on the table, it also includes our father's room number, room 500, with Mr. R. Grady listed and the son, Travis. But the check-in date is hidden. After picking up the motel map, we can see how large this place is, and exploring further, we'll discover the key to room 306. We also find a rotary calendar that needs a date, possibly the date when Mr. Grady and his son checked into the hotel, so for now, we will leave it. With the manager's door being locked, we instead just head outside, and we go upstairs to the second section of the motel rooms, heading for, specifically, 306. Opening our map of the hotel, we can also see different costs and rates of each room, with the peak per night being $30, and the off-peak nights, which would be about $20. Also, they want to charge $2 per bucket of ice, which is honestly really expensive, man. That shit needs to be free. At first, I struggled to make my way around until we reach a barrier that seems to have been put up, with tons of police tape, the same tape used whenever a crime has been committed. Looking at the map, this is the same path that would lead to the 500 room. For the time being, I explore some of the other ones instead, going to room 302, having a strange situation going on. Inside is a suitcase, which is filled with different kinds of shoes. So I don't know if this is just a guy who has a foot fetish, but shit's weird. Or it could be the shoes of murder victims from a serial killer, maybe. Heading upstairs, we enter room 316, which contains a broken down wedding cake and a male wedding suit and female wedding dress on the bed. Exiting, we deal with a few enemies before making our way down where we first enter room 308. Here we find a new enemy type. This is the two-back. This thing is honestly disturbing. It looks like two humans fused together, but the most obvious part about it has got to be that it symbolizes two humans having intercourse, but in a very gruesome way. There's also more reasoning for this, but I'll explain it at the end of the video. For now, all you need to know is that these guys spew acid, and if they manage to lunge at us, they will pin us down and do incredible damage. So we quickly get out of here and head instead to room 306. So as you'll notice, there are just a lot of rooms you have to explore. Now the first thing I notice in this room is a small drawing. This is the Vitruvian Man, a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, and it's a nude man drawing and is also Leonardo's representation of the ideal body proportions, which were derived by Vitruvius, who was a Roman architect. Now, this painting could mean something, but I did notice throughout this game, and I won't spoil it, but most of these rooms are in relation to Travis. It's part of his past being given to you piece by piece. Heading into the bathroom of the room, we also find a mirror, which we can now use to transport to the other worlds. Here we find a note, and this is a very long one. To my beloved wife, I miss you so intensely. Watching them take you away was like a dagger through my heart. It had to be done, but now I am so alone. It's pretty evident this was written by, well, Travis's dad. So we continue reading the rest of it. He continues a letter mentioning that he told Travis that his mom had died, also wishing that perhaps she had died, as she was no longer the Helen that he remembers. Heading out, the whole motel is now rusty and looks like an old factory. We also see the two-back, once again, roaming around. With most doors being closed, we're able to enter room 503 and use the mirror to return to the normal world. However, room 503 is a disgusting place. Everywhere there are pictures, like something out of a serial killer's wildest dreams. We also find a letter. It is believed a being of tremendous mental energy may become a vessel capable of giving birth to Samael, the god worshipped by this cult. Samael's arrival will bring forth paradise on earth. Given that this vessel is to be molded with suffering and pain, just what kind of god and what kind of paradise would result? Now, the letter talks about Samael, which in folklore is the king of all demons and the angel of death. So whoever wrote this is aware of the cult who are after Alessa and are trying to summon the literal demon king to earth. Looking around the rest of the room, there are drawings and paintings of the butcher as well. Exiting the room, we run into a Caliban, and a small distance away, there is a room that our father, Mr. Grady, had booked, room 500. However, it's covered in yellow police tape, and we can't open it yet, but if we stand close to it, all we hear is disgruntled voices. Heading over to the maintenance room, we kill another straitjacket before finding the entrance to the maintenance corridor. And this place is honestly my #1 favorite area and part of this game because of how actually disturbing it really is. There are holes all over the place here, which can peer and peek into each motel room's bathroom. And that is terrifying to me. It reminds me of actually the plot that they used in the movie El Royale. Now, spoilers for Bad Times at the El Royale if you haven't already watched it. See, in the El Royale movie, there is a similar plot of a cult, but the most disturbing part of that movie is that the motel in which the actual movie takes place, it has fake mirrors in each room, which allow the people on the other side to spy on the people in the rooms. Now, in the movie, this is used to film people for either the filmer's own sexual gratification or to film politicians and then blackmail them. However, in Silent Hill Origins, these peepholes seem to have been used by the staff or the owners to look at people while they're getting a shower. And looking through the hole that leads into room 500, we see Travis's father.
Helen, every time I look in his eyes, I see you. It's not enough. I can't be there for him. There's too much pain in this world without you. That thing that stole your body, it had the right idea.
It seems that even Travis's dad thought that his wife was taken by some sort of demonic power, or perhaps he considered the sickness of her mind to be demonic in itself. The location where he was standing in the bathroom, we can now see a calendar with the 12th being circled in, and the month being listed only has 29 days, so it's most likely February. With a big fish on top of the calendar that resembles the fish we saw in the calendar device back in the manager's office. So I guess we know the month and the day, but we still need the year. Again, these peepholes are more disturbing because this is something that I think most of us are more afraid of. Being somewhere where we think we are private, we're away from prying eyes, and people can look in at our most intimate moments. So because I give zero shits, I'm gonna just look into what people are doing. Checking the Pink Moon Suite, we don't see much besides a static TV. Then there is the King Suite, which looks empty, and so does room 501 and 502. However, the Rose Suite room is different. Inside, we hear the sound of a woman laughing, but also moaning. Another thing we notice is syringes that are possibly for drug use. But the biggest giveaway for me is inside of here, we also see on the side wall a red jacket. The exact jacket that we've seen on Lisa that she's been carrying throughout Origins. Moving down to the end of the corridor, my suspicion is confirmed. There's a camera, probably used by one of the motel creeps to film people having intimate relations. At the end of the hall, we also find two more things. One is a key to the manager's office, and the other is a photo. Photo is not normal either. It's a picture of someone with their head fully blown off, with the text on it listing the cause of death as shotgun. Checking the final room, that being 504, the room with all the photos, we see him. Now, he doesn't notice us, and instead seems to just calmly stand around and wait, observing the photos of himself in the room. Now, what's interesting is that if we step back from the peephole and then try to look inside of it again, the butcher is now gone. With the manager's key in our possession, we now leave the maintenance room. Here we also discover a heavy-duty device, which we could use to open something later. We also find Redeemer ammo, which will be for another pistol. Right next to all of that, there's another letter, and this one is addressed to someone called Juana. It talks about a man in the Cleopatra room being furious about the washing machine and storming off in anger, and then explains how to fix the machine by setting it to low spin and 60 degrees, and then to drain and pre-rinse. Leaving the letter on us for now, we head back onto the streets, and here we use the back alley behind the staff accommodations, where we run into not one, but two of the two-back enemy types, perhaps indicating that this location behind the staff accommodations might have been a place where they came during work hours to do the nasty. After killing both of them, we can now head towards the manager's office. Using the key in our hand, we unlock the door, and entering, we have to face off against another two-back. Now, the first time I did this, I actually died, and I had to replay the whole first section of the motel. On the table, we find a note, and it's written by the manager. Christ alive. One of the cleaners called me over, said there was something wrong with room 500. Door was open. Inside, a sweet Jesus. Stench made me puke. The kid, just stood there. They said he'd been there for 10 hours. I ended up crying my eyes out. Shit like this shouldn't happen. The police have got the room locked up for now. I'm going home. Room 500 again, with police tape all around it, and even the manager puking from what he saw inside. It seems that whatever happened to Travis and his father inside of that room is clearly pretty grim. Exiting through the second door, we make our way to room 108. Here we beat another two-back, but it doesn't end there. The room has a giant Confederate flag on the wall, and also a revolver on the table, the Redeemer, a classic 44 hand cannon. We also find a gun magazine, so whoever stayed in this room must have been a southern gentleman with a love for guns. With this stuff in our hands, we head further down and check each room, with only 106 being open. Eventually though, we reach the laundromat, which is locked. Heading around the corner towards the kitchen, we find another straitjacket, which we defeat, before laying our eyes upon what seems to be the corpse of a two-back. Its innards have been cut open with a knife, and it seems that it had limped its way out of the kitchen since the blood trail leads right back there. Not knowing what waits for us on the other side, we enter the kitchen. What we see is the butcher taking apart a two-back, which makes the noise of almost a dying pig. It's genuinely disturbing before he lays his eyes on us. And so our fight begins. Now, this boss battle against the butcher only really takes place within the kitchen space itself, and we're required to play Ring Around the Rosie to deal with him, while unloading loads of bullets after bullets from our assault rifle. Now, thing is, the first time I did this during my PlayStation 2 playthrough, I would get stuck while in the reloading animation, which would pretty much give me an instant death. Because if the butcher snatches you up even once, you are more or less dead meat. Eventually, after defeating him, however, Travis grabs his cleaver and plunges it straight into his back, ending the butcher's rampage once and for all. Looking around the rest of the kitchen, we're able to pick up a few items before walking inside of the motel's diner. The diner is mostly empty, with none of the devices like the jukebox even being usable. However, there is another note, and this one seems to once again be from Mr. Grady, where, as we learn from the bottom of the letter, his name is Richard. It seems that the absence of Travis's mom may have had a profound impact on his dad, causing him too much pain and suffering. The loneliness of losing his beloved wife seems to have taken a toll on his mind, making him feel bitter and sleazy. We also learn how long of a time had passed between Travis's mother being put in the mental institute and him and his father showing up at the motel. Exactly 2 years. Here we find actually the motel's pool. Unfortunately, Travis does not want to go for a dip, even though I wouldn't do that either. However, in the water we do see the shape of a heart. Some kind of golden heart. Unfortunately, Travis can't swim, so we can't get it for now. Checking the rest of the rooms around us, room 201 is available, and entering it, we just defeat a straitjacket, and here we also find loads of animal and bird cages. Not really sure exactly what this is supposed to represent, but for now, we'll move on. Every other door seems to be locked, but not the one that goes to the game room. For whatever reason, Travis is able to pick up 5 pool cues, and I have no idea where this man puts these things, but he's a true human marvel. Now, I feel like this is the least believable thing in Silent Hill Origins. Not the occult demons or the monsters, rather Travis's insane ability to carry half of a supermarket in his back pocket. Interestingly, this place doesn't have any music, but rather just the sound of an old pinball machine, playing itself over and over again. Walking up to the machine, it's the only thing glowing and making noise in the whole room. On top of it, we find a token. Now, this token seems to be the one that's needed to use the washing machine, so let's head out.
Can I have some money for the pinball?
Yes, about this afternoon.
It's okay. I just want to play the pinball.
Sure. There. I'm going back to the room for a little while. Wait for me here.
It seems that this is where Travis was left as a kid to play while his dad stayed in his motel room. We make our way to the laundromats hastily. Using the token we just found, we put it inside of the machine. Now that it's turned on, we have to follow the note from the janitor, which we found earlier. Now, the machine had to be on low spin, 60 degrees wash, with drain and pre-rinse, but the symbols in front of us aren't very clear, so we have to open the manual, which we can find at the table behind us. Now, looking at the symbols, we should now have a general idea of what to do, and after inputting everything correctly, the door opens. Picking up the item, it's the Cleopatra key, which should give us access to the Cleopatra room, which is also the same room belonging to the man from the janitor's note. The man who was complaining so much and who simply ran away. I'll be honest, at first I struggled a bit to figure out where this room was, but eventually I find myself on the upstairs section of the motel, and the key allows us to enter the room. This whole place, with the walls and the furniture, is all Egyptian and Cleopatra themed. On the top of one of the beds in the room, we find a photo and some blood right next to it. Now, taking a look at the photo, it's another one just like the one we found in the creepy corridor. This one, however, states that the cause of death was by snake bite. In the room, we can also hear the laughing or crying of a woman, and I honestly couldn't tell the difference. Following some of the blood, it leads us towards the bathroom. The whole place is just filled with blood, and the bathtub is missing with a giant hole. This franchise really has an obsession with giant random holes. Of course, in every game, the hole represents a lot of different things. In Travis's case, I'm guessing it's a way to show how he's just going deeper and deeper into his own mind, into the darkest parts of his psyche. We run into Lisa and Dr. Kaufman, as both of them are getting off the bed while getting dressed. Travis just acknowledges her before facing off against the doctor, who refers to us as Mr. Grady.
Habit of popping up where you're not wanted, Mr. Grady. Isn't it time you left town?
I can't.
Try harder.
Seems like the two of them were, well, doing the dirty. Looking around the room, we find something else on one of the tables. It's white powder, and I think we can all guess what it is. As for what the white powder is, it's most likely a drug known as White Claudia. But this is also where a lot of people have issues with Origins, as they feel that Lisa changes from someone who is just under the influence and the fist of Kaufman to instead be some overtly slutty junkie who ends up being killed before the events of Silent Hill 1 even takes place, with her ghost in that game not even remembering any of the events from Origins. Now, I think these changes or gaps in the lore, which retcon certain events or characters, is where people have most issues with this game. Lisa wasn't a junkie in Silent Hill 1 necessarily, so making her into a straight-up junkie in Origins and into a kind of slutty one reasonably makes people angry about the decision about her as a character, hence why a lot of people don't want to consider Origins as canon. We finish up admiring the white powder, we find a note addressed to Kaufman by Dahlia about the preparations almost being ready for some sort of event. Now, this seems to be connected to the cult's goal for Alessa. It even mentions Travis and how he's running around the town chasing after ghosts, and considering Travis to be ignorant of the bigger picture that is taking place. So, they also mention the florist pieces, the whole puzzle being put together, and we need to find the last remaining ones. So, to do that, we use the mirror, go over to the other world, where we actually run into another two-back, which is really interesting because it makes sense. The two-back represents, well, intercourse, more or less, and the room we were just inside of clearly had Lisa as well as Dr. Kaufman doing the nasty. So, after killing this thing, we also find another one of those pictures. This one, it looks like the victim died from an overdose, which could be from the white Claudia that we saw in the room, and also could be related to how Lisa passes away. We exit the building, and now we can go to that pool, the same one that had that golden heart in it, and this time, we can actually reach it and pick it up. Putting it into our hands, we go over to the diner. Inside, there are corpses and bodies hanging, which look like flailed men. Inside of one of them, we pull out an ornamental dagger. Now that we have it in our possession, we can use it to open the room named Nero upstairs, with Nero being the name of the final emperor of Rome. For the most part, the room contains really not much of interest besides another photo. This time, it's one of someone with a knife through them, similar to the knife we just stabbed into the door to enter this room. Checking the bathroom, we find another hole. Jumping through it, we end up in one of the rooms that leads straight towards the creepy corridor. And at the end of it, we find the final photo. Now, this one is different from all the others. What we see is someone resembling Travis's dad. And the text says, "Cause of death, broken heart." Exiting the corridor, we discover another note. It's simply addressed to a ghost. The letter is by Richard, and it's the letter he wrote to his wife, where he finally came to terms with her truly being gone. Apparently, he actually brought Helen a gift, but in her delirium, she just grabbed it and smashed it. This was the moment Richard finally woke up, as he puts it. The whole time, for 2 whole years, Richard had seemingly been telling himself that his wife was just sick, and eventually she'd come back to him. But he finally realized that that wasn't the case. He had finally learned that she was just truly gone. He tried to recall their marriage and love and their past, but he couldn't. He retorts that Travis will be fine on his own before finishing off his letter by saying he's going to go see her again. Back in the hallway, we reach room 503. Using the mirror, we reappear in the room that was filled with the butcher's pictures. Of course, he can't be found here because we've already killed him. I'll be honest, at this point, I didn't know exactly where to go or what to do next, but we did have that jeweled heart, and reading some of the flavor text, it points out that when it's shaken, there's a rattling inside of it. So we'll be heading over to the maintenance room to use that device we found previously to crack this thing open. Using the device, it opens up. Inside of the heart, we find a wedding ring. If we examine it, the ring has a message engraved on it. "To my June bride, love forever, Richard." I guess what we just had in our hands was our dad's literal heart, which got broken, and inside of it, we found the thing that was being hidden, which was his love for his wife. But now with the ring in our pockets, we rush over to the reception. Walking up to the rotary calendar, we can now solve the puzzle. Now, the first piece of it has got to be the wedding ring. Travis's father calls his mother Helen his June bride, implying that they were married in the month of June. The second piece of the puzzle is on the calendar in the wall that we saw in room 500. That one had 12 circled on it, and finally, we have something you may have all forgotten about, but it's the lucky quarter that Travis had on him since he was a child. Now, this lucky quarter was the one given to him by his dad the last time he saw him, when he was left in the game room at the motel. If you guys remember, it had the number 61 on it. Typing in 06-12-1961. We then place the ring inside, and something drops down behind us on the keyboard. It's the room 500 key. So, there's only one thing that remains now. We have to go to the room and see what waits behind it. Heading to the normal world version of the door, we can't seem to enter it, but we do hear ghostly noises echoing from it once again. Since this path didn't work, we instead used a mirror to enter the door from the other side. Watch as the memory of childhood Travis walks up to the door. Now, standing here in front of it, the noise and the echoes around us just get louder and more nauseating. Finally, we use the key to enter room 500. However, this time when we use the key, the noise that is made is much louder and more impactful. It's much more heavy. Inside, the first thing we see is a save point, probably indicating something is about to go down. Next is a long staircase, which feels very out of place here. So far, every other room has been exactly the same in size, but this one, well, this is going to lead us down the furthest and deepest that Travis has ever gone. Walking down the stairs, it's pure silence. Kind of eerie, as opposed to the usual background noise we heard all around the rest of Silent Hill's streets and buildings. Only our footsteps can be heard as we reach the bottom of the stairs. Inside, we witness what happened to Travis's father.
Daddy, I won the game. I still got a quarter left. You want the quarter? Daddy, wake up. Please, Daddy.
I'm not sleeping, son.
Daddy.
You knew I wasn't sleeping. Why did you stand there for so long? It wasn't right.
Please, Daddy.
It wasn't healthy, son.
We now learn why Travis has been going through all of this. His own dad took his own life, and the way he did it was really brutal. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't like the way that this is portrayed. Actually seeing his dad, well, hanging there, frankly, I think was really poorly done. This could have been done more nuanced, and they could have easily just changed this scene and made it a little bit more unclear as to what things were about. Like, we kind of already knew his life was already taken, but literally putting him in front of us and having him, or more or less his corpse, yelling at Travis for simply being a child and being traumatized by this situation, it's really bizarre. However, I do think everything leading up to this was perfect. Having us with the lucky quarter with the 61 on it, being specifically the one quarter left after playing at the game arcade section in the game, I actually think that was really cool. I think everything leading up to this part of the game was really well executed, but I just wish they would have kept this part a little bit more subtle. They didn't have to show the father's face. They could have simply just shown his silhouette hanging, and that honestly would have been more impactful than seeing him literally yelling at us. I think that was poorly executed. Nonetheless, though, now it's time for the boss battle. Now we're forced to actually battle this thing. This is the Sad Daddy, and Sad Daddy is a bit of a creepy design. First of all, it is basically a representation of how Travis's dad lost his life, as the whole monster is hanging and attached to the building, to the room. The same way that he does take her life in a room like this, it will kind of linger there forever. There will be a stigma of that place for eternity. And not just that, but the actual battle itself is relatively straightforward. But this is also the smallest location that a battle can actually be done in terms of boss battles in any Silent Hill game. This is like the smallest zone to fight in. As for what you really do here, it's mostly just spamming off bullets, because this thing will send out tentacles to grab you or spew a bunch of acid, which is kind of hard to avoid, but if you do avoid it, you're able to just spam off bullets until it finally dies. Finally, we get our hands on the truth piece, which is fitting as we now know the truth about Travis and his past.
Possible. Dad, how could he do that to himself?
Now, this time around, Travis is frustrated, and he's angry at Alessa for not letting him forget these memories. He doesn't want to think about it. He doesn't want to dig these feelings up, but she's forced it out of him, and so he threatens her with the florist piece. When she shows up, she, well, just smiles at him, and he questions if maybe he can now look into her sick little mind, which her answer to that is simply to use the sirens to send us back again. This time when we wake up, the music is much more calm, and the sense of urge and rush is no more. We find the final piece of the florist puzzle, the present piece, with the name making total sense. We're back in the present. Things have been sorted out, and now we need to deal with the things happening in this current moment.
This is the last one.
Somehow Travis knows it's the last piece, probably because this one we didn't have to fight for. We didn't have to go to a bunch of trauma to actually get it. Instead, we're just faced with this game's probably most annoying puzzle. Here we have to match the sides of the triangles to the middle piece. We have to make sure that each side matches its neighbor. After doing this a few times, you mostly just have to rotate it until you get it right. Eventually, the florist piece starts to glow.
You're here?
So, now we get it. Alessa has been using us to break herself free from the florist piece. Again, the circle we see appearing on the door is the same one we saw in the burning building at the start of the game. However, something is very confusing to me here. Why did Alessa tell us to let her burn when we were there that first time? It doesn't really make any sense. It's a little confusing. But also, it goes against the established lore of Silent Hill 1, where the burning didn't really go the same way that it did in this game. So, it is what it is. Now, it turns out we were inside of the basement of the Alchemilla Hospital, and as we exit the hospital, we run into Dahlia, Alessa's mother, complaining about us letting Alessa out. But when Travis asks her to help him leave this place, she mocks him, being happy that the ritual can still take place no matter what.
I thought that's what she wanted too. I want out. Can you help me?
You want out? Ha ha! Far too late for that. Even with your misguided help, she can't stop us now. The ceremony begins soon. Finally, she will birth God! Here she comes. Look upon what you have wrought!
With Alessa appearing behind us, things are getting intense. She is free, and she's basically ripping the fabric of this world apart, bringing us to the other world, and Travis and everyone else falls in there too. I'm actually personally a really big fan of the representation of how she basically brings the other world in here, because that's what Alessa does. She brings to life the other side. Rushing around, we find a map. It seems to have been drawn by a child, possibly Alessa, left for us as a way to get out of here, but also possibly to save her. Now, following the map, it leads us through the treacherous roads here filled with all sorts of monsters. All of these are from throughout Silent Hill Origins, with ammo also being spread about on the exact path that Alessa left for us. When we reach our destination, it's a place called the Green Lion. Now, this is, for those who are aware, an actually antique shop ran by Dahlia Gillespie in the original Silent Hill game, with the Green Lion eating a sun being an actual motif used in alchemy. Here we have the similar stairs from room 500, but these don't seem to belong to us. This seems to be the deepest parts of Alessa's mind and her specific suffering. The antique store is mostly empty, besides a big hole which we can crawl through. This is the same hole that in Silent Hill 1, Harry Mason was able to go through to reach the secret altar where the cult was having its meetings. Given the fact that the cult is doing illegal stuff, it makes sense that they would use secret tunnels, and crawling all the way to the end, we find the altar. And here, we have a final save point, so we make sure to save and get ready for whatever waits for us. I also want to point out that the camera here is a little bit tilted in a sort of Dutch angle, and this is usually used to convey emotions of unease, and that's exactly what this place gives me, an uneasy feeling. The music is intense, but also mysterious, letting me know that we're about to run into something crazy. Following the blood trail, we enter inside.
She's really worked you over, hasn't she? I'm surprised to see you. We had assumed you'd just leave. Well, time to put her pawn to sleep. Good night.
So, it's pretty obvious Kaufman is part of the cult. After sedating Travis and putting us down into a slumber, we now understand what's going on. Kaufman and Dahlia are part of the cult, and together, they've been using their influence and power to stop Travis, but also, they've used it against people like Lisa. By drugging her and abusing her, they've been able to use her against us by telling her to make up a bunch of lies. But it doesn't really end there. They seem to want to summon some kind of demon to use Alessa's power as a conduit for it.
What is it? Don't touch. Ow, it's hot! Leave it be. It is a cage for a demon. Contained? His power will focus yours. Release him, and we will all burn in the fires of hell!
As we find ourselves sitting in the middle of the cult circle, they bring out a demon. This is Alessa's dream. Now, that is the name of this actual boss, and it's sort of a smaller version of the cult's god. So Dahlia wants to contain it within the florist piece as a way to amplify Alessa's powers. But due to Kaufman sedating us, we're now stuck with this thing inside of a nightmarish world. Before we get into the boss battle, its design is very typical of a demon creature with the classic red skin and long claws and big horns. Honestly, there isn't really much to say about it. I do think the design looks cool, but it does differ from all other enemies, which were manifestations of Travis's past and had kind of human elements to them, giving them more of a terrifying, uncanny valley feel. This thing just feels more simple in its design and kind of less threatening. The original design for the boss battle actually looked something like this, a weird spider-like creature, which ended up not actually being the one they went with. There was also concept art for something like a demon with multiple arms sticking out of it, as well as other demon forms, but eventually they settled on the design that we have right in front of us. However, that is not where this thing actually ends though. This battle is really intense, and probably the hardest battle in this game, as it will shoot out a bunch of bursts of fire into the sky and have fireballs fall down on you. It also uses a giant beam attack, which is really easy to avoid, but does an insane amount of damage if it does actually hit you. So, best course of action is to run around and spam bullets like every other battle in Silent Hill. When we finally take it down, shooting off all the bullets, the florist pieces shake and the chains exit out of it that tear the demon apart and bring it back into the core. It seems that by defeating the demon, we basically saved Alessa and allowed her to now basically split herself in two as we watch her shooting off a laser from the florist piece, which, yes, this is ridiculous, but this is Silent Hill at the end of the day. We see as a baby is summoned on top of her. Most likely, this is Cheryl. Cheryl from Silent Hill 1. It is ridiculous. The same Cheryl that's found on the side of the road. And that's it. Yeah, I'm not kidding. That's the ending. That's literally how it goes. Travis, with his keys in hand, smiles and exits Silent Hill while walking back to his truck, which is still in the same place and hasn't been touched. Now, in his rearview mirror, he sees Alessa as she's holding a baby. He looks at his mileage odometer, which he resets. This is a way for Travis to symbolically start over. But things don't end before we hear the voice of Harry Mason.
I don't believe it. Harry, it's a baby.
It's a girl. Go on. Hold her.
Cheryl. We'll call her Cheryl.
Half the soul is lost. The seed lies dormant.
The other half is not lost. We'll use a summoning spell. Hearing her pain.
So yeah, what we're hearing is Dahlia's preparations to get Alessa back, but also Harry and his wife finding Cheryl on the side of the road. And that pretty much is the conclusion of the game. The ending song plays, and frankly, I had an amazing time. Okay, so that was a lot to digest here, but in the end, let's break everything down. I should first point out that what we just played was the game's so-called good ending, where Travis saves Alessa, and this brings upon the existence of, I guess, Cheryl in a weird way? I don't know, it's a little bit odd and confusing. She's, of course, the main character of Silent Hill 3. Now, this ending being the most likely canonic ending, with Travis leaving, having faced his demons, which leads back to the demon we just faced, right? That thing could have either been a manifestation of Travis's personal demon, but there's also a theory that it could have been what Dahlia sees her daughter Alessa as. Another theory also suggests that this could be the Red God, which is actually the true god of the cult. Now, of course, this is not guaranteed, but the fact that it is red-colored does sort of imply a connection. Again, this is a running theory, but we'll leave it there for now. Basically, Travis has faced his demons, he's helped out Alessa, and now he can leave. But that's not all. There are still two other endings. First, I think we should look at arguably the least important one, but the funniest one, that being the UFO ending. Just like every other Silent Hill game, Origins features one as well. In the UFO ending, we get a goofy little comic book drawing where Travis looks up at the moon when all of a sudden a UFO appears.
Huh? Doesn't fit. A lonely moon. You've always been there for me, haven't you?
Coming out of it, we see an alien holding Mira, a Shiba Inu dog that was featured in many different Silent Hill UFO endings. Now, this whole ending is more so just a joke, and I love the part where the alien asks Travis if he knows how to drive stick.
You drive stick?
This ending is just a fun one, and to get it, you need to pick up the key for room 502 during your second playthrough at the post office. Using it and unlocking the door will give you this ending. And this has to be, again, the funniest shit I've seen in a while, and without a doubt, the funniest and best ending in the game. However, there's still one more ending that is far more disturbing and awful. It's the game's bad ending, which opens up a weird can of worms. So, the bad ending implies a lot of things. What we see is Travis laying on what seems to be a metallic gurney in some sort of hospital. He's trying to wiggle his way out, but as he looks around, we can see injections going in and some sort of drug being used on him. On the back table, we also see what seems to be some sort of weapon that's being used against people, but it doesn't end there. We also hear him talking to a woman. Travis is the butcher. At least that's what this ending is trying to tell me. We hear him in this audio even killing a woman at the motel after calling her mommy, meaning that he must have been a serial killer that, due to the trauma from his loss of both his parents, decided to go after women just like his mom that abused him. We also hear him killing a worker at the motel who could be any of the many corpses that we see lying around the whole place. Now, there were actually several things pointing towards Travis being the butcher all along. Now, one of the facts was that Travis never really reacted heavily to the butcher while witnessing him literally killing different creatures around town. The second point is the photos that are spread about the motel. Now, each of these photos doesn't really fit with anything else in the games besides the butcher, each of them being taken out in different ways and methods, and the photos existing as mementos from his murders. And the fact that Travis, when we see his head flashing with the butcher's head, is inside of that room where we found all the photos of the butcher himself. Then there's also the fact that there is a photo of Travis's dad with a broken heart. In a messed up way, Travis could be seeing his father's death as something that he himself caused. And if Travis was not born, then his mother would never have attempted to take his life, and as such, his parents could have lived happily together. This would also explain why Travis was hesitant to talk about women with his trucker friend at the start of the game, and why Travis makes a cameo in Silent Hill Homecoming, where he doesn't go after that game's protagonist, as perhaps he only went after women because of, well, having a sort of complex because of his mother. This all really plays well into the theme of sexual frustration as well, as Travis seems to imagine Lisa as being quite of a sexual nature, and some of the monsters we see, like the two-back, as well as the straitjacket, and all these guys have different things that play into this feeling of his. I will say this ending is, in my opinion, not the canon one, as I find that the good ending ties up things way more neatly and leaves Travis as just a guy which Silent Hill swallowed up, but he managed to claw his way out. Those were the endings. Now all that remains is the different bonus features and unlockables that can be found in Silent Hill Origins. Just like any other Silent Hill game, Origins also has a lot of Easter eggs and extra bonus content that you can do when you have a new game plus, so your second playthrough. One of the first things you will notice is the extra options menu. Going in here, you can actually change things like an automatic run button so you don't have to hold it in. There's also extra blood and the ability to remove the noise filter. But I think the best thing is the torch projection. You can actually change to a custom projector that looks like a smiley face or even the actual pentagram that's being used by none else than Alessa. Speaking of which, there's actually 3 Easter eggs that are all for the different endings. If you did the good ending, you will actually be rewarded with the Savior title and the Lonely Moon Gauntlets. However, if you did the Butcher ending, which is the bad ending, you will actually get hands on the Great Cleaver. This is the same one that the Butcher used while trying to kill people around town, and you will also get an outfit that matches it, that looks like bloody rags, and possibly the outfit that, well, Travis used while doing his serial murders. Also, there's the Ambassador one, which is specifically for getting the UFO ending, and the reward for this one is the Tesla rifle, named after, I would assume, Nikola Tesla, and not Elon Musk's company. Nonetheless though, this weapon is really useful, and you also get a UFO outfit, which is the Ambassador one, and you just look like you came from space. There are 11 other extra outfits you can also get, and also other rewards. One of these is the Stalker outfit, which just requires you to use the flashlight for less than 3 hours in the game. The other reward for this is also the night vision goggles, which are really useful. Then there is also the Collector outfit. This one just requires you to collect more than 300 items, so if you do play the game, pick up everything you see to get this at the end of the game. Then there's also the Sprinter one, which I freaking love because the reward is that Travis gets a Sprinter outfit, which on the back actually says Travis Grady, or TG, which I think was really funny, but to get this one, you just gotta complete the game in under 2 hours. For the Sharpshooter one, you actually just gotta kill 75% of the enemies with firearms. You gotta use shooting weapons to get this one, and it also gives you a cool outfit, which basically makes you look like a little soldier. The Weaponsmith achievement, though, is on the opposite end of the spectrum. For this one, you gotta kill 75% of the enemies using melee weapons, and then you get a sick-looking Weaponsmith outfit. This one is super edgy. The Brawler outfit, though, requires you to kill more than 50% of the enemies using your fists, and I love this one because you basically look like an epic luchador. However, the Cartographer one is not really my favorite, but this one just requires you to look at the map less than 25 times, which you should be able to do if you play through this game 2 or 3 times. You should know where to exactly go. However, the Explorer one is a really cool one. This one requires you to travel 22.5 kilometers or more to get this outfit. Again, it doesn't look that special. Look, it just makes you look like somebody who just came out of the jungle for some reason. Now, the Daredevil one is honestly my favorite. To do this, you just gotta complete the whole game without saving a single time, which can be really difficult on a first playthrough. However, the outfit you get is a Shiba Inu fursuit. I mean, something is wrong with this, but I also love it so much. So much wrong, but I love it anyways. However, for the Fireman suit, you basically just have to rescue Alessa from the fire in less than 80 seconds, and the reward is a Fireman suit, but also a fire axe, which is a strong weapon that you can use. Finally, there's the Codebreaker, and this is the best one. You just gotta do the Konami code, the classic up, up, down, down, left, right, XO, and if you do it right, you will hear a specific chime, after which you'll get the Codebreaker outfit. And this outfit actually is very specific, because it looks like a particular character from Silent Hill 3, specifically Vincent Smith. Now, I could just be imagining this, but at least I thought it looked very similar. Overall, I love these extra bonuses in games, and the ones in Silent Hill Origins are actually pretty good. I really liked all of these. Too bad that some of them are only unlockable on your second playthrough, but that's for the most part standard. Finally, to conclude things, I have to mention some stuff in regards to this game's development and my experience. First of all, my personal playthrough was amazing, and I loved the game, but I know a lot of people have very strong opinions on Origins, So let's break them down. Now, in regards to the game's development, it was made in a very short amount of time. The original Silent Hill Origins team from LA by Climax Studios actually wanted to make Silent Hill Origins into a dark comedy based on the TV show Scrubs, which was genuinely a stupid idea. And if you want to watch gameplay on the screen right here, this is what the game's prototype looked like, more like something out of Resident Evil. Luckily, this version of the game never came out due to the company who made it, that being the Climax Studios division in LA, having that whole branch closing down. Instead, the game was given to the Portsmouth branch of the Climax Group over in the UK. And this turned out to honestly be a blessing for the game. See, Origins was the first game developed outside of Konami and away from what was known as Team Silent, the group that made the first 4 games. So when Climax, the company in the United Kingdom, received this mess, they had to work with essentially nothing. They wanted to make sure to create a good and proper Silent Hill game, but Konami told them that they could do whatever they want with it as long as they did it in the same time frame and budget that was given the first time around. So the studio had to put together a whole game more or less from scratch in a very short amount of time, while also trying to stay faithful to the original ones. And this is of course where some people have complaints. The game felt to some too safe, and reviewers thought it just didn't do enough things differently, whereas lore fans hate the changes made to the characters like Alessa and how it conflicts with the first game's established and set up lore. Again, I think that Climax didn't deserve the hate they got for Origins. It was a game meant for the PSP handheld, and as a handheld Silent Hill experience, I think it was really good, and out of all the post-Team Silent games, I think it's the best one, and feels like the most Silent Hill-y out of all of them, which is why I give this game a solid 7 out of 10 rating. I think it's a solid B-tier game. At least that's where I would put it on a tier list. I do think it falls behind the first 4 games in quality, but at the end of the day, I think the hate it got was way too much. Does it need to exist? Perhaps not, but I'm glad it does, because to me, it was a fun game, and I have had it on my mind since the day I first played it. I've replayed it now 3 times, and I think a game that stays on your mind for that long will definitely be better than something like Silent Hill Homecoming, okay? Either way, that is going to be the end of this video. I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope you have all enjoyed it. This video took about 4 months to put together of work, so I'd really appreciate if you guys could drop a like down below, and feel free to subscribe for more videos like this, and let me know what you guys thought about Silent Hill Origins. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.